Let's face it, learning a language is complicated. And if we're new to it, we're gonna make all sorts of mistakes. So what kind of things can you keep in mind right now to ensure that you will learn languages in the most efficient way possible? Let's talk about that. Hi y'all, my name's Cole, and if you don't know me, I've been learning languages for years. So naturally, I've made a lot of mistakes along the way and have learned from all of them. So today I'm going to share with you around 10 really big mistakes that I used to make all the time that only slowed down my progress so that you guys can learn languages in the most efficient way possible. The first mistake is not being consistent. When people talk about consistency in language learning or really anything else, it's not about the amount of time that you spend on it itself, but rather the fact that you're doing at least a little bit every single day. Doing 15 minutes a day is much better than doing 3 or 4 hours in one day on the weekend. And that's just because we're much more likely to remember things like words and phrases when we've been repeatedly exposing ourselves to them over time. Just think about the last time that you crammed the night before for some test. Yes, you remembered the information the next day and was able to do well on your exam. But if I was a betting man, I would bet that you don't really remember much of that stuff at all today. It's the same thing with language learning. The more times that you encountered a word or phrase, the more likely you are to remember it and to include it into your long-term memory, therefore remembering it forever, or at least for a good amount of time. So the next time that you hear someone on the internet talking about how you have to spend 10 hours a day on languages, just know that they are completely and utterly wrong. Just do a little bit every day and you'll be fine. The next mistake goes hand in hand in consistency, which is not reviewing what you've already learned. I am so guilty of this one, mostly because I really hate flashcards. And if you're following a language app like Duolingo that has a guided course, it's so much more tempting just to keep going rather than review stuff that you've already learned. But really, this is all just a facade because after a certain amount of time, our brains aren't going to remember everything anyway. The best way to review, in my opinion, without it being boring, is simply to just go back and look at different kinds of articles and other sources of media that have similar topics to what you've already studied. So if once upon a time you learned a bunch of science vocabulary, then go back and listen to a related podcast on the topic. A lot of people think that if we can't recall a word that we learned before, then we really didn't know that word in the first place. But this is again completely wrong, because memory and recall are two very different processes in the brain. We can have a bunch of passive vocabulary that we can't recall in an instant unless we go back and hear it again. But once we hear it, it will come back to you almost instantly, like really quickly. And if for some reason that you are a big fan of flashcards, then you'll find this step to be very easy. Because honestly, it's probably the most logical way to do things. But screw logic! Because it's all about enjoying the process anyway, so do what you want to do. But make sure that you do review. The next mistake is not having an intrinsic desire to learn, and this goes hand in hand with motivation. People decide to learn languages for many reasons, and one of them, sometimes, is money. And while money is great and gives you options, it's not exactly a great reason to learn a language, because it's the type of motivation that will slowly but surely fade away over time. So if you want to make sure that you can stick with your studies and constantly be motivated, you have to find a really reliable source of motivation that comes from within you. For example, for me, the biggest reason why I learn languages are the people and the experiences that I'm yet to have. And that motivation will never ever leave my consciousness. Genuine curiosity is also a big one. It also helps if you know someone that speaks the language, like a significant other or a family member. This will kind of bring the language to life as you'll have a physical incarnation of the language in your life at all times. So the best way to keep your motivation when learning a language is to find something that really interests you, either about the language itself, the culture, or having some physical people present in your life. Another mistake is only practicing one way. Let me elaborate. There are so many ways to study language, but we can break them down into two categories: deliberate and non-deliberate practice. Deliberate practice is when you focus 100% of your attention on the language and is considered to be the best. But it's really unrealistic to think that we will always have time every single day to sit down and study languages, especially with life being as dynamic as it is. So the days when you can't devote some time to learning a language, we can take advantage of non-deliberate practice. This mostly consists of utilizing the dead time in your day. I made a video about it, you should check it out right there. If you commute to work, you can listen to a podcast or some music in your target language, for example. Or when you're cleaning or doing other activities where you could be listening to something else. Cooking is also a great example. And just to cover all my bases, even though I already said that I hate flashcards, if I found that I didn't practice any of my languages on any given day for some reason or another, then I'll look over a few flashcards on my phone before I go to bed. So this is all really just about covering your bases and knowing that there's more than one way to learn and study a language. Use this to your advantage and your progress will skyrocket. The next mistake is focusing too much on grammar. A lot of language learners that just started learning languages are going to be attracted to things like grammatical exercises because that's how they learned them in middle and high school. But the only reason why they taught that to you in that manner in middle and high school is because it's really easy to teach that way. But in reality, it's not the best way to study at all. And this is for many reasons. One of which is that you're going to need a lot of input, no matter what language you're learning. And practicing grammar is almost the direct opposite of that. Think about how a baby learns a language. They have absolutely zero understanding of how grammar really works in their language. A good rule of thumb is to spend about 80% of the time that you devote to language on input and about 20% or even less on grammar. In my opinion, you should only study grammar in your target language when you don't understand a certain construction that you encounter in your input. Or if you notice that native speakers are using all these different kinds of quirks that you don't understand. Grammar does allow you to better understand the language and how it works, but you should absolutely not rely on it if you want to make quick progress. The next mistake, and this is a huge one, is getting discouraged by your mistakes. Mistakes are the greatest things that can ever happen to you when you're learning a language. I like to think of them as extra points on a test. Because you put all this effort into studying for a test, and then the day comes and you take the test and you do great. But even though you do great, you may miss a few questions here and there. But you'll be able to see what the correct answer was on the questions you got wrong, and you'll never ever make that mistake again. The difference between tests and language learning is that there is no test, unless you want there to be one. So the only thing mistakes can do is increase your knowledge of the language. And if you ever want to achieve an advanced C1 to C2 level, you have to be willing to make a ton of mistakes. We all do it. I still make mistakes all the time in my native language. It's really all about just switching your mindset from thinking that mistakes are bad to thinking of them as the greatest things ever. This next mistake I had to figure out the hard way, which is don't feel bad if you don't understand native speakers. Because these guys are the cream of the crop when it comes to languages. And they know things that you couldn't possibly know unless you lived in their country and had the same experiences that they had. This is what's known as sociolinguistic knowledge, and is a huge branch that not a lot of people talk about. And it really just makes up all of these little sayings and idioms that we throw around in our daily life amongst other native speakers that we learned over years of living in our native land. Plus, they speak super fast and sometimes, believe it or not, but they make mistakes and even merge words. And as a learner, you're probably just not used to that. Even if you've achieved an advanced level, it's still difficult sometimes to listen to native speakers talk amongst each other. But you've come this far, and really all you need is more exposure to how native speakers communicate with each other. Instead, don't be afraid to ask a bunch of questions to learn as much as you possibly can. Don't let yourself sit in ignorance, and you'll be just fine. The next mistake is sacrificing efficiency and enjoyment, or enjoyment for efficiency. Basically, you have to find something that works for you. Just because polyglot A and polyglot B use different methods than you do, doesn't mean that they're necessarily right when it comes to you. We all have different goals, different strengths, and we need to figure out what they are. So if you found that you've adopted a really efficient method of learning languages that you hate, it may be better to sacrifice some of that efficiency so that you enjoy the process more, so that you'll stick with it longer. Or on the flip side, if you find that you're having an absolute blast learning languages, but you're not getting anywhere, then you may want to reflect on what you're doing and adjust accordingly. Next is comparing yourself to others. Ooh, I heard that Jose learned French in 3 months. What? He must be a genius. Yeah, I've been learning French for 3 years and haven't gotten anywhere. I'm gonna quit now. No. Comparing yourself to others is one of the absolute worst things that you can do when it comes to learning languages, because everybody is different, and the speed at which you're going to learn a language depends on a lot of different factors, way more to even list them here. So don't feel bad if god damn it. So don't feel bad if someone online is apparently making more progress than you are. And on the other hand, if people are making less progress than you are, don't let this get to your ego and become overconfident, because that can lead to a lot of complications down the road. Just go at your own pace, learn what you want to learn. We all have different goals, so who cares how we do it? It's really just a matter of time. It's a lot like going to the gym. Some people gain weight or lose weight easier than others. But if you're just starting out, you can't be comparing yourself to the biggest guy in the gym that has been bodybuilding professionally for decades, because it's just not a fair comparison. That huge bodybuilder that you see over there was once a beginner himself. And if he wasted his time comparing himself to all the other huge bodybuilders when he was a beginner, he would never have gotten to the position that he is in today. So don't do that. Go at your own pace. It's okay, really. Finally! Last mistake is stressing yourself out. I've gone over a lot in this video, and while everything in this video is really important to know, I cannot expect every single person watching this video to stop what they're doing and follow everything that I'm saying to the letter, especially without stressing themselves out or making any huge changes in their lifestyle, because that's the exact opposite of what I'm trying to achieve here. I'm trying to teach you guys to incorporate language learning into your life in a way that will enrich it and will not interfere at all with what you're already doing. So while you absolutely should adopt to all of these guidelines over time, you don't need to do it right away if you feel like it'll be too much. Because after all, the process is supposed to be really fun, enriching, and just awesome in general. As the great legendary Hungarian polyglot Katolom once said, learning a language is the only thing worth doing, even poorly. If you're really cool, you may just want to check out 2 more of my videos here. Thank you all so much for watching. Some great new videos are coming soon, so be sure to be around for that. Also, I read all the comments, so don't be afraid to put something down there. Any sort of question that's on your mind, any sort of suggestion for a video, any sort of constructive criticism, let me know. Thank you all so much for watching, and peace.